Hey guys, in this spot we're going to be checking out the new Star Ace, the Hunger Games Mockingjay Katniss Everdeen 1/6 scale collectible action figure. Katniss Everdeen first appeared to moviegoers back in 2012 in the original Hunger Games. She comes with a rather interesting display stand featuring the Hunger Games Mockingjay down below, but what's interesting about it is it's an adjustable neck, which means that you can really display Katniss in any which pose that you really see fit, whether it be something more simplistic like having her just standing upright, or if you want to have her in flight mode, or jumping up, firing her bow and arrow. You could have the waist clip that comes included with the stand brought a little further up. And to accomplish that, there's a little screw just on the back here. You have to loosen just a little bit. And then once that's done, the stand, the waist clip, will slide up and down. So again, you can have it a little further down if you want to have her just standing upright. Or if you want to have a little bit more of a dynamic pose, you can bring the waist clip further up as well. Her particular outfit in this figure form comes packaged with a pair of black trousers, a black top, and then a series of different armors. The black armor front chest piece, as well as some shoulder armor, arm armor, as well as a pair of shin guards. All of these pieces are sculpted quite nicely. Not only are they textured very finely with almost a cross-hatching effect, but they've added just a little bit of like a silver paint, which is very small, but it's enough to just kind of bring some of those details closer. Especially when you start seeing like the chest armor plate. You can see how it's all strapped around and harnessed to the back of her torso. She also has the Mockingjay badge right at the top featured there as well. And overall, just like the costume looks quite nice on her. They could have gone a couple of different routes for a Katniss figure release. I think this was a smart route. This was a smart route giving her this particular outfit. As for her face sculpt, I think it's really done well. Yes, I think the likeness not only to Katniss, but also, of course, the actress that played her, Jennifer Lawrence, I think both could be said it shares a really uncanny likeness to her. About the only thing I would say I would have changed slightly to her is that while she does feature real doll hair, not only in the strands of hair on the front, but all atop the head of her, as well as her ponytail. Unfortunately, one thing that they did do though was they painted just underneath where the hair finishes. So essentially where the doll hair stops and has been braided, they've gone and painted like a little lower half of it in a brown, just to kind of give it that sense that's still continuing to flow. It doesn't look as bad from afar, but up close it does look like the colors just don't match one another. They've also sculpted in the appearance of like a sideburn, or where the additional hair continues on, but because this is sculpted and then up here is doll hair, it does look a little slightly off from it. That being said though, the face sculpt again is really done nicely, and one of the ongoing trends that I find myself repeating when it comes to these Star Ace reviews is that the paint is always really done well. Like, it gives you a natural looking flesh tone, which funny enough can be really a bit of a struggle when it comes to 6 scale figure releases. A lot of times they may come across a little muddy or a little too pale. I think this is just the right tone for a Jennifer Lawrence likeness or Katniss Everdeen likeness. And you can see like there's like individual little spots and freckles on the face. It's done very well. Even like the areas around the eyes are subtle. They don't go for wow factor here, and I think that gives it a little bit more of a realistic look to it. Especially like the lips. The lips are just the right color tone, where it looks like more like a natural unlipsticked lip, as opposed to sometimes when companies do lips on 6 scale figures, they tend to make them a little bit too vibrant. Like that wouldn't be like the natural color for a lip. But everything comes together quite well here. Admittingly so, though, it seems like some profile images, or it's like sometimes when you rotate the figure, I think she looks the best likeness maybe from like front on. From the side, it doesn't look too bad. From of course a side profile, I don't think it looks as much like her. But if you are displaying her straight on, I think it's got a really good likeness here to Jennifer Lawrence. Going back to, though, her fabric, I really like the multiple different layers and materials that they used. So up here, for example, right where her collar is, you've got this really nice textured plastic. Again, you've got the shoulder guards as well as the front chest plate. And then underneath that, you've got your regular fabric suit. You can see also as well, if you just if I move the arm out of the way, you can see how everything is strapped itself together by real fabric straps. I suppose ideally you could try the means to try to take this completely off. I really wouldn't entertain it myself. Now we go back to the hair, though. I do think like the braid of the hair is done quite nicely. And right at the very end, you can see how they've elasticized the hair together. It does feel like real hair, though, and that's really impressive. You'd be surprised how unsuccessful some companies can be when it comes to hair. Sometimes it tends to be a little bit too artificial, whereas I feel here it feels, it looks, and overall it gets more the impression that this is real hair as opposed to doll hair. Now, Katniss, for example, has a much thinner frame, a much thinner proportion frame, like versus, say, a superhero, for example, and I think it conveys well here in figure form. She reads like she's a little shorter, though technically her height, she's 12 inches tall. But maybe it's just because the thin nature of her limbs, and especially like her legs, and her head seems bigger, but it seems bigger in the correct proportions. Like it seems bigger because of she's a younger character, that it would make sense that, she doesn't have a much broader frame to her, that she looks more youthful here. Once again, going back to areas such as her pants, she's got these little pockets, which is a nice touch, and some pocket areas here. Now these don't look like they open, they're flapped, but they have no real pockets. Again, can be said for the back of her trousers. There's pockets, or at least the indication of a pocket flap, but no means to open it and have a real working pocket inside. Here's a side of the boot here, which has been covered by the front. Again, the front, I think they're called leg greaves, which is basically just like a plate that comes over top the front of the boot. If I move the boot ever so slightly, you can see how the boot has been sculpted with the sculpt indication there of laces. They've given just a little bit, which hopefully you can see here on camera, just a little wear on the back heel as well as the front of the boot, just so it doesn't look as super pristine. The hands, or at least this one hand, has the three-fingered glove, which is a lot of what archers tend to wear. This would be the side that you'd be pulling the arrow back against the bow. Over here, on the other hand, you've got, on the other hand, a regular flesh hand. Now, when you mix and match these hands will remain flesh on the one side, just regular bare hand on the one side, and then on this side will vary, but still have the three fingers on the glove. Even on the hand themselves, or the hands, they've sculpted in nails. Not painted, mind you, but just the slight indication of a fingernail. And some of the little spots and freckles and stuff I was discussing before are also here on the hands as well. So let's talk accessories, and she does come with a fair bit. First things first, she comes with a pair of sculpted wings, which don't really have a lot of paint to them, but more than make up for it in a fantastic looking sculpt. Now, one thing I like that Star Ace did do, instead of trying to find the means to peg these into place, they resorted instead just to rely on magnets, which I think is a smarter route to go. It also means, too, that you're not having to force the wings onto her back. You simply just attach them via magnets. And the end result, again, looks good. Again, you can do the same thing on the other side with the wings. And because this is non-sculpted hair, the hair does a pretty good job of staying out of the way. While we're also discussing her back, she does come with a quiver, complete with arrows I have already added. She comes with a total of 6 arrows, and I suppose you could theoretically fit all the arrows in them. Here's one of them, for example. The arrows are really not that much different from one another, other than the tip where the feather sits. is the same color as the tip or the point of the arrow. So for example, you've got one that has a slight copper borderline red color, and then you've got a couple that are black and a couple that are yellow. And again, you just take the arrows and they slide right down into the bottom of the quiver. And this is basically a little bit of a concern, not by really the way I'm doing it, but by the fact that it's a very thin plastic. And again, I don't feel like you probably could fit all 6 arrows in there, but because of the thin nature of the arrow, I don't really want to be forcing it in place. As well, this could also be something that I would stress as well. If you are displaying her holding the arrow and holding the bow, be very mindful of the fact that this is a thinner plastic. But anyways, going back to the quiver has some nice detailing there as well to it. And once again, much like the wings, they use a magnet in order to attach it to the back. And simply just line it up just like that, and the quiver and wings stay perfectly in place. And of course, you can't have a quiver and arrows without a bow, and she does come with one as well. And I'm happy to see that Star Ace uses a elasticized cord to attach the bow, as opposed to this just being plastic. It does give you a little extra, wiggle room. And obviously, if you want to be displaying her fairly realistic, you can actually have it where she's pulling back on the bow via the elastic, and then you can have the arrow in place, which is what I did at the beginning of this review. As well, she comes with a flag. Now, the flag is an interesting material. It's hard to pinpoint what it feels like. It's almost like a satin, but it's almost got a little bit of elasticity to it as well. And then you've got the crest or the logo featured on the front there as well. But it's a really nice material, I have to say. It has just a very simplistic gray handle to it, but I do like that it flows quite well. If they could only make use of like this material for some like superhero capes, for example, I think it does have a really nice flow to it. Maybe it's just a combination again of perhaps like a spandex or some material that has a little bit of a stretchy give to it. Rounding out the last of her accessories, she comes with, of course, a series of interchangeable hands. Now, some of the hands are suited for holding other objects, such as basically the hand that I've got in her socket right now is ideal for holding the flag, because the flag post basically sits just right inside of that, very securely and perfect. Then she also has a couple of hands for specifically this side here. She has a hand suited for holding not only the bow cord, but also an arrow. And I'll show you how that works in a second. She also has a regular relaxed hand. And she also has the right hand with the 3-finger sign. And I'm glad they also included that as well. And there's just a close-up look at some of the details that they've sculpted into the 3-finger glove. This hand, on the other hand, does have the means to hold the bow, but then the only other hand that they've given her for this side at least is just a relaxed palm. And then showing you what it looks like with the arrow hand, you simply just slide the feather portion of the arrow in between her 2 fingers, and then you can have that drawn back as she's holding the bow with the other hand. Just before we look at her articulation, one thing I do want to mention is that it seems, at least I find that she doesn't stand the greatest. Now, I don't know if it's just because I can't imagine like there's a lot of weight on the back of her with the wings and then the quiver, but I wonder if it maybe has something to do with the fact that her feet are flat and there's not really much means to be able to adjust the legs forward. There's a couple of times actually just having her standing upright, as you see here, she has toppled back. And again, maybe some of that has something to do with the way that I'm adding so much extra to her back. I don't think it really chalks that much up to being top heavy, but I would say displaying her, just a little food for thought, at least from my own observations, I would really stress using a display stand. The display stand obviously would guarantee that she doesn't topple over. I've noticed it a couple of times myself. Maybe it seems like the feet are slightly angled down, which again just wants to lean itself to basically wanting to topple over. So use a display stand if you get this figure. I would recommend really using it, because most of the time I've been pretty successful that the figure doesn't topple over, but I have noticed, I've noticed that she does seem to want to tilt back a little bit. So for the figure's articulation, she does have a ball joint in the top of the head. Now it also seems as well, without going ahead and prying away the collar, that it seems like she might actually have a ball joint at the base of the neck as well, which works quite well. The figure's head is a little on the stiff side, but I do feel like it moves down here as well as up here as well. The arms hinge outward and not at all restricted by the fact that she's got the shoulder guards. In fact, the guards are hinged, so they do move out of the way freely when you want to move the arms. They move forward and back. She does have a swivel right at the very top, basically where the arm attaches to the shoulder. There's a cut right there where you can rotate the bicep, or really like the whole arm in general. She has what appears to be a double hinge on the elbow. She has a rotation and hinge also on the individual hands. And we'll just move the quiver out of the way because that falls off from time to time. She does have what I can only gather to be a ab crunch. As you could probably guess it though, the nature of the way that this is plastic and a very constricted torso, you do get that bend, but it's very, very minimum. You do also get a waist swivel that attaches basically where the torso attaches to the lower half. As for her legs, the legs split outward fairly easy. A forward and back motion, not too restricted at all by her pants. She has what seems to be a double hinge on the knee. And then going back to what I was discussing with the foot, the feet and boot portion do swivel back and forth. But even though this is a soft plastic, it doesn't seem like it wants to hinge up and down too much. And even on top of that, I wouldn't force this forward too much for fear that this front boot plate could potentially break off. You can kind of see where it's attached itself to the lower part, basically this attaching to this right here. There's not really a whole heck of a lot that's attaching the two pieces, so be mindful when you're forcing the foot forward. All the more reason why I would say using a display stand, at least in this instance, is probably something you would want to consider. The Star Ace, the Hunger Games Mockingjay Katniss Everdeen figure, is really a nice looking piece. I'm not surprised. I wanted to say I'm going into, when I first had a look at this figure, thinking to myself, okay, you know what? I think they could really pull it off, because Star Ace, known for their really high-end Harry Potter figures, we know they can do good sculpts. But how would they approach something outside the realm of Harry Potter? Well, as we've seen with other reviews that I've done on this channel as well, Star Ace does do a lot of cool figures outside the realm of Harry Potter, and that's really one of the good things about doing reviews such as this. It gives me a chance to showcase to you guys some of the stuff that they do outside the realm of simply Harry Potter. A lot of people think Star Ace, they think Harry Potter, but there's a whole world out there as well of some of the stuff that they're producing and will be producing that don't fall within the Harry Potter banner. As for Katniss Everdeen, I think the sculpt is done really well. Some of the best hair as well, I would say, for a 6-scale figure release. She has all the necessary accessories that one would expect to find an Everdeen figure to have, and overall I'm pretty happy with how she turned out. The only small nitpick I can make about the figure, and it's very, very small, is standing can be an issue with this figure, at least that I've found myself. A display stand, and the display stand that they've included here is a much needed accompanying piece that you would want to have with her when you have her standing on your display. Other than the little small nitpicks with having her stand, I'm really, really impressed with what they ended up doing with this particular figure. Currently, Katniss Everdeen from Star Ace, I think is slated to be released in October to November 2017. So currently she is on pre-order in a couple of different websites if you wanted to go and pre-order her today. If you're a big fan, though, of the Hunger Games, I would say this is a great figure to pick up. Even if you're not a big fan and maybe just a casual watcher of, say, some of the Hunger Games movies, I still think this is a great looking figure for the likeness that we got here of Jennifer. And just, again, overall, how well they did this figure, I still think it's a pickup, even if you're not a big Hunger Games fan. And that says a lot when a company can bring in new collectors to a specific 6-scale figure based on a franchise that they may not necessarily watch. I'm not a diehard, Hunger Games fan, but I am a big fan of this particular figure, and I think they did a really good job of it. Today, once again, we were having a look at the Star Ace, the Hunger Games Mockingjay Katniss Everdeen 6-scale figure. Thanks for watching, as you always do, guys, and certainly stay tuned. More videos are heading your way. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet to this channel, what are you waiting for? Hit that little subscribe button down below. You won't miss a beat when it comes to future videos. And if specifically you want to check out some of other Star Ace's offerings, I've got a playlist on this channel specifically for Star Ace. So you can go over there and check out some of those older videos and watch at your viewing pleasure. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.